question. You're on mute, Damien.
Yes, I think Deborah has just mentioned the point I wanted to make. Maybe we change the way we assess students, but also I like what Emma was talking about in terms of the fact that generative AI systems are not exactly what they seem to be at the moment. They don't know it all at the moment. Because I've been checking, I just checked too now. ChatGPT still doesn't know my village in Nigeria, so they don't know everything. These generative AI systems don't know everything. So there's no fear to ban them because they're going to give the students the perfect answers to everything. No, they're not. So it is important for us to embrace it and not ban it, but also train the students on how to use it responsibly. And then think about changing policies and also changing the way we assess the students. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So there's been a few questions that have come up both in the Q&A and in the chat around infrastructure in Africa, perhaps, and Damien, you just touched on it there, perhaps not being as strong as other world regions. And, you know, there's sort of questions around what could be done to perhaps strengthen that infrastructure and perhaps sort of change things.
Yeah, I can definitely touch on this. Maybe I'm not an expert in infrastructure in Africa, but it is the underlying technical and human infrastructure behind AI is very important. For you to talk about AI, there has to be electricity. You have to have a computer or your phone or a technology for you to access some of these AI systems. Are they available? Or the connectivity in Africa is still very low. The internet connectivity in Africa is still very low. And most people in Africa still do not have electricity. In one of the papers that I wrote recently, I was making a point that we have not succeeded in the first two industrial revolutions, and we're entering the fourth. So we have not achieved good level of electricity. We have not achieved good level of good transportation and things like that. So it is important for us to also concentrate on those technical infrastructure that is important. Also in universities, in terms of data, we're talking about data, how to control data. African universities should also start thinking about having their own internal repositories and infrastructure for data storage, because that's the only way you can have a good data management that preserves your data and also gives you access to control the data. So all these are important, but they need funding, which is always the elephant in the room. So public sector, private sector, we need to actually come together in Africa to provide funding for ourselves, because the way we receive funding from the global north is actually the reason why data colonialism is a big concern, because the person that gives you funding can also control the outcomes of the research. So all these things are important, but funding is always as I say, the big elephant in the room. How we get that, the dynamics of it can change from university to university. Yeah.
Catherine, may I add just one small point? I think there is another elephant in the room, and that's collaboration. I think it is really necessary for us to work very hard on African exchange programs among African universities. We are always, you know, here in South Africa, we're always jumping over the whole of Africa in our haste to have exchange programs with the North. We should build exchange programs with each other so that we can help each other. So that if there is a university, like in South Africa, Wits University will have a quantum computing capability very soon, if it doesn't already. And, you know, so in terms of infrastructure, we need to help each other, and we need to have visiting programs. But there is also, as you know, I mean, this is not, it can become an issue. And I really think it's time for us to stand together and to show the world that we even though we have infrastructural problems, we have the capacity in terms of the expertise, and we are not research poor or data poor because we really are research poor or data poor. It is simply because of external factors. But we must take care that we don't become our own biggest enemies. So I really think it is time for us to collaborate, and this is such a perfect platform for us to like really consistently work on some kind of program and make a what's the word? I can't speak English today. To find to make not a repository, but a record of what kind of infrastructure is available where, maybe through this specific association, and start working on that and take it seriously. It's funding, but it's also collaboration.
I have a feeling that this is something that the AAU is currently working on. So perhaps sort of Madame Ndomo at the end of the session may touch on that. It may be a bit early to talk about it. But certainly the AAU is a fantastic platform for beginning the discussions at the very least. Certainly, go ahead.
Yeah. About the two elephants here, the funding and the collaboration. I mean, they are, I think, very closely related. Maybe they're one elephant and two different sides of it. And the reason I'm saying this is I'm looking at Europe. And of course, Europe is a continent with very different countries, different cultures, different research histories. And the European Union, as one of its main activities, is to try to bridge the gaps, in particular using research for that very purpose. So that's what the European Research Framework programs are there for. I think they've been reasonably successful, but we should also look at the price tag. Right? The current one is about 100 billion euros, so it doesn't come cheap. But it did help to provide the funding for the research, and it does foster collaboration quite successfully.
Okay, thank you. So certainly collaboration is really going to kind of further this, I mean, and other research issues as well. We will now move on to the next question because I can see that we're running short on time. This has been such a fascinating debate. We might not get to the end of the questions at this rate. So supposing data ethics should be covered more extensively in computer science education, data science education, and other research-intensive disciplines, what do you think would be the most effective approach to achieve this? And Professor Stahl, if we could please start with your views.
Yeah, so that's an old question in terms of the recognition that ethical concerns, professional questions, and so on need to be covered in technical training is old. We've known this for a while. The question of how to do it, I think, isn't really settled, and I'm not sure that there is a good answer to it. I think that there are several models. One would be to try to integrate this type of thinking across the curriculum. So you have it from the first day when you enter university, it's sprinkled across the various modules you do. It goes all the way to your final dissertation or however you ended up. And I think that to some extent would be the idea. The reason I think why this typically falls down is that then the ethical and professional sides are always marginal, and they're typically taught by people who are not expert and not necessarily very interested in them. So therefore, I think the second established model is that you pull this out and have a specific identifiable stream. So, for example, the University of Nottingham, all final year students in computer science have to take a module on professional ethics in computing, which I have the pleasure of teaching on. That has the advantage that there is a clear stream of responsibilities. There's a clear allocation of resources for it. But it also has the disadvantage that it sets the ethical professional side apart from the technical development. That debate is as old as at least as old as my experience of higher education, which is a few decades now. I don't think it's settled. I don't think that there is a clear answer to that, but I do think that struggling between those two, and maybe there are better models that I haven't come across yet. but at least those two are well established. I think what universities have to do is that they have to find ways that work for them, that work for the staff they have, that work for the students they have, and that work for the ambitions and strategies they have. I think I'll leave it here.
Thank you very much. So these subjects are already being covered, but perhaps not extensively enough. I guess this is sort of the message that's coming from that. Deborah, would you please like to weigh in?
Yes, sure. I think when it comes to a most effective approach to achieve this, first of all, I should say that there probably would not be a one best approach for teaching AI ethics, but I think it would encompass a mix of different approaches. And because when it comes to AI ethics in particular, we are dealing with diversity is like really essential in this regard. So we want to think about teaching in a way that you are able to pass on the requisite information to learners. But I think there've also been a number of works that have actually focused solely on teaching methodologies, how they can actually facilitate learning. And I think when we are teaching AI ethics, we can think about it that we are teaching to two different groups of people who would be users of AI and developers of AI. Whatever it is, whether you are the student is going to be a developer of AI or a user of AI, they learning about AI ethics is important. And I think we can adapt some of the research works that have been focused on teaching methodologies. A few of them I think that I saw a paper that actually highlights some of these teaching methodologies. And one of them I think that could also be very useful would be this methodology they describe as a social reform perspective. So it's more like aiming at bringing about social change. So you involve activities with learners from diverse communities, and then encouraging them to take more of critical stance and encouraging them to watch documentaries and discuss in their own context. I think a good example of this is this Coded Bias movie on Netflix that what is like, I think it's a great source for students to actually learn about algorithmic bias and really think about how or what is the ethical issues related to it and how they can deal with it. Another approach we can think about is what they describe as a developmental approach, which is proposing more of a growth mindset of the learner. So most learners are able to learn much if the content that you're delivering is in line with their own understanding of issues around them, right? So, I mean, in the African context, I think something that holds dear to us is like religion, right? You could somewhat, with teaching AI ethics, you bring in how they think about it in a religious view. Do you think that if you have to give a loan to two people, and one comes from one ethnic group and another comes from another ethnic group, how are you going to deal with it? And then allowing them to actually think through this process when they're even working with practical projects. If they're building a model using a data set, you encourage them to think about the ethical issues that they think can arise with what they are doing. So whatever activity they are doing, you allow them to develop this approach themselves. So I think that we can focus our attention on adapting some teaching methodologies that have worked in the past, and then try to see how this can fit into the AI ethics curriculum and teaching AI ethics in general. Yeah.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Would any of our other panelists like to weigh in on this question at this point? That's absolutely fine. I'm going to throw in a question from the question and answers here. And I know that Professor Stahl is doing some work in this area. There is a participant that would like to know how AI is being used and can be used in healthcare. So I don't know if you could maybe just touch briefly on some of the main innovations of AI use in healthcare and the risks.
But that's a big topic. There are many different applications. I think you can observe research on AI in diagnostics. That's things like recognition, image recognition of, I don't know, pathological slides and so on, so recognition of cancer. I think there are then also attempts to bring various types of data streams together to find new ways of identifying diseases. You have big data analytics of huge disparate types of data. So for example, you bring together lifestyle data with fMRI data with health trackers and try to see whether new insights come from that. So that's one of those examples of big data type of research that AI makes possible. But you also have work around improvements of processes of whole healthcare workflows. So it's a huge field. I mean, there's enormous amount of work being done in that.
Thank you, but thank you for giving us a quick walk through all the same. So on to the final question, and then if we have time, we might pick up on a few more audience questions at that point. What challenges do African universities particularly face in integrating data ethics into the curriculum? And I might start with Professor Eke.
Yes. There are so many challenges universities face in the attempt to integrate data ethics into the curriculum. One is lack of awareness, because data ethics is a relatively new field. And many people within universities are not still aware of how to integrate this into the curriculum. So there needs to be training, as we have pointed out earlier on, but also another critical challenge is limited resources for the course. African universities are still underfunded, and I know many people will like me saying this. And many universities in Africa face resource constraints, which make it a bit difficult to develop and implement new courses. And also, there is lack of relevant local context in data ethics at the moment, because the global discussion on data ethics is still dominated by examples or use cases from the global north. So African universities need to develop and tailor the curriculum to address some ethical issues specific to the African context, which it's not, you can't find easily at the moment. So that is a challenge. And Emma will agree with me here that at the global level, epistemic injustice is still real, where our narratives, African narratives and values and principles and context within the AI ecosystem is still neglected and often forgotten. So in developing data ethics or AI ethics curriculum within African universities, we need to develop specific use cases that can speak to our context and which are not there at the moment. And most often, African university curricula are already packed, and lecturers are still stuck in their ways, which is true. And this does not promote flexibility in terms of accepting new ideas to integrate into the curriculum, but it is important. And some of these points I've raised are the issues I'm currently experiencing in helping a few African universities to integrate data science into the curriculum, which is not there at the moment. So it is important to look at some of these challenges and find ways to mitigate them.
Wonderful, thank you very much. I'm wondering whether Professor Roetkamp-Bloem might have something to add to that.
Yes, I agree with everything that Damien said, but I think it is important, again, collaboration again for me is really important. But yeah, the issue of epistemic injustice, and also, you know, there's another form almost of that. If you think of you know, why is it important to bring data science and data ethics into the curriculum? We also need to explain to not just university administrators, but also to the students and their families who are helping to pay for their studies, why it is important, and what it is that they will in fact be able to do. There was a question in the chat. So, if you live in a rural area and you send your son or your daughter to university, to become a data scientist. If you live in a infrastructure poor region, what is the point? But which always means that we cannot think of any of these questions in a vacuum. We have to think of the socioeconomic and political situation as well. But in the end, what will it is something that we have to find a way to do. So it is, but so maybe starting off with explaining why. If I think of the courses that we offer, people always talk about service courses. Philosophy doesn't service anybody, enrichment courses. So if we teach ethics to the economic and management science students in one of our enrichment courses, or to the health faculty, or then to computer science, students also feel, why do we need to know these kinds of things? It's not what I'm interested in. Why do I need to worry myself about that? Let the guys in humanity do that. So you need to, it's a whole it's the meta text. It's not just the practical stuff like the funding and the collaboration. What it is to show them why data science is important, why it's important to have responsible and African data scientists in Africa, developing African software for African problems with African values. Tell them why this is important. Tell them how important a role they will have in the future of Africa. And then explain to them why data ethics must come hand in hand with data science. So I think it is, we sometimes step over that, and we just expect students to, okay, here is something, I have to do it. Let's explain to them why they have to do it.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to throw in a quick question from the audience. I think I'll direct this at Professor Stahl, because he does have a lot of expertise in this area. And then we'll move on to a final question. I think it's a wonderful question to wrap up, but I'll save that till the end. So Professor Stahl, how would you propose that people sell the idea of focusing on original critical thinking first before generative AI as an aid to the students?
I think the Emma actually referred to this earlier. So the importance for students to have the ability to critically reflect on what they're doing and not just take for granted that the machines know what they're doing. Right? Actually, maybe it's worth sharing that. But when Emma was talking about this, I asked ChatGPT whether the text that it generates has meaning. And ChatGPT said, yes. It does have meaning, but it said very clearly that it doesn't understand. It has no consciousness, but the meaning can be in the context. And I think that's not too bad an answer for somebody who has no consciousness. But the point here really is that with regards to this question, students need to understand the limitations of the technology they're working with. And they need to be able to assess what they're seeing and have the background to be able to also identify the limitations, right? And therefore, I think it is utterly essential that students do get these insights, in particular now where ChatGPT, while it has no consciousness, it certainly does appear like it might have one, right? So it's in a position to produce text which to me is meaningful. And playing with this, where does meaning sit? And does it sit in the originator of a text? Does it sit in the recipient? Big old philosophical questions that typically computer science students, for example, are never exposed to at all. I think these are important, even though it does raise the challenge that students do on occasion come back, as Emma also rightly said, that why am I doing this? I want to be a computer scientist. And I think we need to convey the message that it is important for them as computer scientists, not just as African computer scientists, but also as computer scientists in the UK, that they understand what the limitations are. And I think that there's a question of, or a component of maturity, of worldview. Some computer science students love to engage with this sort of stuff, others don't, and I think we need to engage with ones who don't, and make sure that they have at least been offered the opportunity to critically reflect on what they're doing, and we do our best to encourage them. We can't force them, but I think we can give our best.
Thank you very much. Professor Campbell, I can see that you've unmuted yourself. Please.
I just want to add to that. I think if we can explain to them well enough what this kind of technology is and how it works, so that they understand that it's not foolproof and they understand how it comes up with what text that it's generating, we will not. It will, we can divert the responsibility that is suddenly put on us to convince students to have integrity, to convince students to be willing to still reflect critically on what they're doing. And it's because they are told, here is something that can take over some of your hardest tasks, like writing an essay in the humanities, that we now suddenly face with convincing them that they still have a role to play. But if they understand the technology is assistive, it is not supposed to take the place of their own thinking. Then that we kind of what's the word? We de-weaponize. I can't speak English today. We take away the sting from that, or the burden of proving to them that convincing them that they still have to do something themselves. And the other thing is, they must believe in their own abilities. There are so many students who don't believe that they can do things on their own. They have to believe we have to work on that as well. They have to have confidence in their own cognitive abilities. They have to believe that they are worth being at university and that they can think up these things for themselves, and feel what it feels like once they've written an essay that somebody gets excited about. So I think it's not, there isn't a recipe in which to do this. But yeah, and there the kind of critical awareness that I spoke of will work, because then they see this as a tool. They don't see, people talk about a personalized tutor, they start seeing it as their best buddy. It's not necessarily their best buddy, because it can lie to them. It can give them wrong information. So, it's about just being open about what kind of thing this is, and what the good that it can bring, but also the bad that it can bring. And then I think they might, and give them examples, that example of that lawyer in New York, give them examples of people who has already lost their jobs for using ChatGPT without using their minds at the same time. So, students are convinced by concrete cases. And there's a host of those to be found on the internet. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on to this last question. This is from one of our Francophone viewers. À votre avis, comment l'IA va-t-elle changer l'éducation en Afrique? So in your opinion, how is AI going to change education in Africa? So just sort of a quick intervention from each of you, because I think that this wonderfully sums up what we've been talking about today. Emma, if you'd like to kick us off.
I think actually Damien is the expert here, not me. And so I will give a very general answer. I think it can really help. It can give students access to quality education that would otherwise, and the examples that Deborah has used of overfull classrooms and in that kind of context, and it connects us to the world. And while we focus a lot on African AI for Africans, if we want to be connected to the world as well, we have to be connected to the world as well. So I think we must be careful that it doesn't ensure that we remain on the receiving end of what the North gives us. So we have to be very much aware of data colonialism, and we have to stand up and make sure that the students actually do get the high quality education that is promised by AI education apps. So again, it's the issue of being aware and protecting ourselves. You know, I just one thing, that's something that really bothers me, and I say this too often, I'll probably be kicked out of a lot of places soon, but it makes me very angry if people sit back and they say, oh, but Emma, just think of those children in rural areas. They will have access to education that they would never otherwise have had because they don't have electricity. Okay, if they don't have access to schools, they will not have access to the infrastructure that they need to use the app. So we need to also, again, we need to start from the ground, and we need to make people aware of what it is that they're actually saying. They sell these things to us, and we have to be critical about what it is that we accept from them. And be careful about ethics dumping. Be careful about people coming to Africa to do stuff that they're not allowed to do in the North. And that's a real and present danger in education in Africa, I think. But over to the master, like Damien. I don't know enough about this. Thanks.
I'm not. But I think this is related to the first question we addressed. After so many AI winters, I think AI is here to stay. No matter how we resist it, it's here to stay. And it's going to make a huge difference in higher education in Africa. It's going to change the way we teach. It's going to change the way we learn. It's going to change the way we do research. And it's also going to change the way we do our administrative stuff in universities. So it is going to have positive impact on education in Africa, but also what of the risk involved. It presents both ethical, legal, and sociocultural dangers to African societies. And we need to be aware of this. We need to develop measures to mitigate against some of these risks, both within the university setup and also within our societies. Because if not, we'll then be reactive to some of the dangers that it poses. But for now, I think we have the advantage of learning from what is happening in the global north to be proactive in our policies, to be proactive in some of the governance mechanisms that we can set up for AI. So, and we need to take the advantage. We need to take the advantage, because if not, being reactive is not the best approach to AI in Africa.
Dr. Cannavalo, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I do agree with so far all what the other panelists have said about AI. I think we've all agreed that it offers a number of benefits, and ranging from the personalized learning to automatic gradings, etc. But we also understand that it also poses some risk and challenges to us, because it's going to amplify existing societal biases. And we've already seen cases of these things, of the Compass algorithm. We've seen the Amazon hiring tool. We've seen the Google search. There are a whole lot of these things, these examples that can actually show that, yes, AI is just going to amplify the existing societal biases. And so we as Africans haven't seen what is happening in the West. I think it's better that we begin to prepare, engage ourselves, embrace ourselves up for not having to replicate and build these systems that would tend to affect some certain groups, or not really or marginalize certain groups in that sense. So we need to put lots of work to build technologies that that follow some technical guides and also know that the technology is evolving. And so at every point in time, would need, even if you come up with a policy, doesn't mean that it should be a policy that should be used for the next 5-10 years. We need to always keep revisiting as the technology advances. And I think that is very important, because we are going to be training and teaching future African leaders, and we need to ensure that we make them well prepared for this technology, right? So that's just a few words I want to add to this. Thanks.
Thank you. That's really valuable. Professor Stahl, perhaps you could kind of round up this debate by responding to the question, how is AI likely to change the face of higher education in Africa?
Yeah, I will answer the first half of the question. How is AI likely to change the face of higher education? Because I will not pretend to know what that's going to do in Africa. But I think just to highlight one point that I suspect is going to be relevant across higher education worldwide. It's not just an African thing. I think AI will force higher educators to rethink what they're doing and how they're doing it. Damien has referred to this earlier. We need to break out of our established ways of thinking, because AI will force us to do that. It will force us to reevaluate what counts as education, what counts as good research, what counts as knowledge. So it will require some flexibility. And just to pick out one point of that, I think it will also force more interdisciplinarity. What ChatGPT, I think, shows us is that this is not a technology that's just a computer science technology anymore. This is something that a philosophy major will have to understand, a medicine major will have to understand. They need to understand what the technology does, what the consequences are. So I think where we will see this going in terms of education is in order for graduates to be successful and to be able to face the challenges that the new technical environment poses worldwide in any or pretty much any employment situation, is that they have to get out of the disciplinary silos. We have to think more broadly, and that will have to start with education. So I think we'll see computer scientists will have to be more open to social sciences, to arts and humanities, and vice versa. And that will be to a significant extent driven by the capabilities that AI and other emerging technologies have, and that we as educators have to take seriously.
Thank you very much. So thank you all for an absolutely fascinating debate there. Taking up what Professor Frederick Almar said at the beginning of this session, the digital revolution has certainly changed our way of life, and it looks like it's definitely changing processes and procedures and life generally in universities in Africa and across the world. And so we've seen how AI can help in data analysis, in student services, budgeting, human resources, and facilitating learning. But we've also touched here on the many challenges that are inherent in AI and modern technologies. So issues such as trust, investment in technical infrastructure, plagiarism, and just infrastructure in general. So we really need to understand the limitations of these technologies, as Professor Stahl has quite rightly said, in order to see how we can move forward. It's also thrown up very many questions and points. So why is integrity important in academic work, for example? Concerns around data colonialism and perpetuating harms, and what intelligence in AI actually does mean. We've also covered how issues with AI are perhaps mainly data related, and how ChatGPT and generative text AI is perhaps changing education at the moment. But there are also many solutions that have been brought up during this debate, collaboration being a very important one, and the development of policies and measures to mitigate those risks. I would like to give a massive thank you to our audience for being with us here today. And I would like to thank our wonderful panel, Dr. Kanubala and Professor Eke, Professor Stahl, and Professor Roetkamp-Blom. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you for this absolutely fascinating debate. And thank you to everyone who helped behind the scenes here in organising and facilitating this event. especially to Professor Juliette Thondlana from Nottingham University, and to Ransford Beoki, Agyeman Okieri, and Nadomu Dlamini from the Association of African Universities. I would also like to apologise for all the audience members who didn't get their questions answered today. There was a fantastic debate there going on in the chat and some absolutely wonderful questions. And thank you all for your contributions. We will be in touch soon with more information. But right now, before everybody goes, please do not, I would like to pass over to Madame Nadomu Dlamini to give a short address from the African Association of Universities to close the African Universities Day celebrations. Madame Dlamini, if you are there.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Catherine, for such an exciting conversation. I think we are ending this week on a very high note. From our side, as the Association of African Universities, I think we have achieved the goals that we had set for this week in terms of bringing to the forefront the discussion of artificial intelligence in African higher education and making sure that we engage our stakeholders so that they also participate in the ongoing debates and discussions about AI. I think throughout this week we have learned that there are many questions, many opportunities. Academic integrity, I think, came out very highly as important for our institutions, that we need to redefine it, re-emphasize it in the midst of the AI revolution. And today, of course, I think the issues around ownership and control of data are critical, and that we need to guard against digital colonization, data colonization, and understand that sustainable AI is really responsible AI. And for us as the association, it remains critical that African governments fund ICT infrastructure and make sure that that infrastructure goes beyond the institutions and communities in towns, but actually reaches the most remote villages, so that then they become part and parcel of what is happening. We also got some cautions around the need to pull back and do proper reframing of what AI means for Africa. We must continue nurturing innovations and the required infrastructure, because AI is computational intensive, is also data intensive. And I think as the association, we were also trying to go beyond the noise and really understand what AI means for us as African higher education institutions. So we need to reduce the over-excitement and consider aligning AI systems to human values. And I think students are at the center of what we are talking about. So the skills of curiosity, collaborating and adapting remain important. And I think it's about life skills and not just the transcripts. We must consider what we are putting in the heads of our students, build capacities of students, revisit what intelligence means, and protect our students, train them to be responsible citizens. Finally, a call to action to us as the AAU. There are some points that emerged. We must continue the AI-related dialogues for African higher education institutions including other dialogues on emerging issues. Support the design delivery of AI literacy training programs for African higher education stakeholders. Support universities in developing AI-related guidelines and policies. Promote exchange programs, which is what we do as the AAU, but I think we need to really up these exchange programs so that universities can share infrastructure and share knowledge. So on behalf of the Secretary General of the Association of African Universities, I would like to thank our moderator, thank the Madam of Ceremonies, Professor Tondlana, and each of our distinguished panelists for an extremely exciting sessions. We wish you a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam.